and let us all do we can to build a better future. Are AOC and the squad effective leaders? Are they? So perhaps this is beating a dead horse already, but I think my personal opinion is AOC, the squad, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, they're not effective leaders. And you have people like Ryan Grimm who continue to carry water for the Democratic Party. Yes, he was on Revolutionary Blackout Network, and I saw that whole interview. He did good. But a few days later, this happened on Bad Faith Politics. And shout out to Kasama Sawant and Briahna Joy Gray.
It was a betrayal. What the actual fuck are you saying? That those of us who are standing up for workers, we have the responsibility. You have the responsibility.
Yes, you have to find a worker. One worker.
They have to justify why it is that they voted to break a strike, knowing that they literally had zero to gain from it.
The workers felt they had something to gain from it. Maybe the workers don't want to be part of this fantasy play. Like the workers, like actually.
What are you talking?
To get rid of the Railway Labor Act?
If socialists and progressive had voted only for a bill with paid sick leave, who in their right mind, who's on the side of the railroad workers, would be blaming them for that? This is complete nonsense.
The rank and file organizes inside BMWED. They push this strategy.
You cannot.
And you're like, well, there's some conservative, and you smear them as conservative. On what basis are you smearing these workers?
I do not appreciate you obscuring what I said.
So there's a little bit more to this, and especially with the fallout of how the squad sided with the Railroad Corporation. Let's face it, Congress did not side with the workers.
No.
If you
think they want paid sick leave. Oh my God.
Even though Congress has unlimited pay, you know, these politicians in Washington D.C., they rarely show up to work. I mean, these people go on so many vacations and have time off. I mean, if the American
they only have to work a few months out of the year. The rest of the time, it is their campaigning or vacationing, and vacationing, vacationing.
Oh God! Oh, if only I had the free time that Congress had. Maybe I could be a productive citizen too. Well, now you know why. Now you know why Nancy is still in office, because she loves feeding off of the fat that is the government.
Look, if they had done what you said, like vote no and then they vote yes, wouldn't their critics be saying, oh, that was just a performative no vote, and they still voted for the sick leave, which then is a fig leaf that covers this thing, that then allows it to get over the Senate, which then and then the Senate takes it out.
No, so, nobody's saying that about.
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Briahna. This is a complete straw man argument that has no basis in reality. If socialists and progressive had voted only for a bill with paid sick leave, who in their right mind, who's on the side of the railroad workers, would be blaming them for that? This is complete nonsense. And it's really just a way to, again,
wait a minute,
away from the reality that nobody in their right mind, Ryan, maybe despite being a political analyst, you thought that the Senate, there was any chance of the Senate voting yes on a paid sick leave bill. But as Briahna, you were saying, workers in their right mind understood that there was zero chance of this passing in the Senate. So what they actually did is what's performative, which is where they gave cover to the Biden administration and to the Republicans to break the strike and to sell out the workers. And yes, Biden did betray, and the betrayal began with the Biden administration. There is no question about that. But it is commentators like yourself who will then, at any moment, whoever among the Democratic Party is in the crossfire of workers, justifiably, then those people are going to be protected. So when the fire was against workers, were angry against AOC and Jayapal, then suddenly AOC starts tweeting, and then you all start defending her by saying, oh well, the unions wanted it. But as I was clarifying before you came, it wasn't union rank and file, and I don't know which rank and file you spoke to, but it is just complete.
And by the way, shout out to Sabrina Sabby Sabs. She's part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. She actually interviewed some of the railroad workers, and they are all pissed. We even saw that infamous video of one who was on CNN. People wonder why and how Donald Trump was so successful in 2016, because he was able to capitalize off an ongoing anger. If people knew what Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and yes, even other Republican leaders, Democrat politicians too, have done to screw us over, people would be screaming bloody murder. You don't have a seat at the table, but yet you have commentators blue checkmark people, pundits on both sides that will go to bat and carry water for the establishment. When I say corporate media has successfully brainwashed Americans into being part of Team Red and Team Blue, they have successfully put us all in abusive relationships. And the only way to break out of it is by voting third party, voting independent, and setting up institutions and organizations not connected to Washington, D.C. Okay? And don't forget, with force of vote, people like Ryan Grimm and everybody else, they were against force of vote, March for Medicare for All, General Strike Summit meeting. But the thing is, turns out after the year 2021, everyone was correct. Hardlands Media, Jimmy Dore, Revolutionary Blackout Network, Convo Couch, and so many others who are speaking truth to power about this. Anyone that's carried water for AOC and the Squad and Congressional Progressive Caucus, guess what? They don't care about you. You remember, TYT and Majority Report really done the most of the heavy lifting, and they don't even show up on those shows. AOC doesn't show up on TYT or Majority Report. She never will.
Nonsense to say that railroad workers who are just struggling for their basic survival were somehow going to be accepting this.
All right. So, Lauren, I kind of want to give you the final words for this. I want to give your thoughts on this real quick.
It does frustrate me how these pundits will attempt to make you be on the side of whoever it is that they're, campaign, rooting for by making up stuff. Well, what if this happened? Well, what if this happened? And if that happened, then this would happen. It's like, you have no idea what would have happened. You have absolutely no idea what might have happened, what would have, coulda, shoulda, because guess what? It didn't. They didn't. They sided with the freaking railroad barons. And instead of siding with the people who were, again, they just wanted some pretty basic shit. And it's like, look, I do not get paid time off. I don't get vacation time. I don't get sick leave. I don't get sick days. I get none of that. I'm in the food industry, right? I get nothing at all. If I had a union, and I would love to get some of those things, but it's one of the, the way that we have to struggle in this country to have some basic shit is absolutely mind-blowing. And then they use these arguments that aren't even really arguments. They're just, again, scare tactics to try and convince you that actually, no, there was no other way this could have shaken out. There was absolutely another way this could have shaken out. There was another way it should have shaken out. If these people in Congress, in politics, if the pundits who root for them had any kind of fucking soul, it would have shaken out in a different way. And
Agreed.
It should have.
I want to just pull up one last thing here, too. This is an article from Socialist Alternative. It came out December 2nd. And it was written by Kashama Sawant. So let's actually hear her words. I won't be able to go through the whole article, but you can find a link in the show notes. There was also an interview that RBN did with Ryan Grimm, but we are running short on time. But they did a fantastic interview with him. And for a moment, I thought maybe Ryan Grimm was maybe saying things because, RBN was able to, give him a good talking to about how screwed up the two-party system is. But then a few days later, he goes on Briahna Joy's podcast and just shows his rear end again. So this is an article from Kashama Sawant from Socialist Alternative. When AOC and other members of the Squad were first elected, most of them did so as self-identified democratic socialists. They ran on working class platforms that include Medicare for all, a federal $15 minimum wage, vowing they would be accountable to working class and oppressed people. In the first year after Biden took office, with the Democrats in control of all three branches of government, Squad members abandoned the first two of these commitments, which refusing to force a vote on Medicare for all, which happened in 2021. That was hosted by Jimmy Dore, Briahna Joy Gray, and so many others, and then rejecting any sort of fight for the $15 minimum wage, the one where independent now Kristen Sinema did her curtsy. Plus, again, the Democrats were nowhere to be seen for March for Medicare for All or 3-day General Strike Summit meeting in 2021. Interesting how all this stuff adds up, and you realize that the progressive Democrats were never going to do this. Now, the third of these promises has been utterly shattered as all but one of the Squad members crossed the picket line and voted with the majority of both Democrats and Republicans in Congress to break the rail workers' strike, cutting off those workers' right to legally withdraw their labor. In doing so, they took a clear side with the billionaire railroad bosses against rail workers who have suffered intolerable conditions for decades. Mind you, again, the Squad and all these politicians, both Democrat and Republicans, have gold-plated healthcare, six-figure salaries, and other wonderful social benefits. This is profoundly a betrayal of working-class people. Years of negotiations between 12 union representatives, 115,000 railroad workers, and a handful of corporations that control 90% of freight rail traffic, as well as the tracks that carry most passenger trains, have now been brought to a screeching halt under the leadership of a Democratic president who describes himself as pro-labor along with the left of his party. The squad and Congressional Progressive Caucus, including Representative Pramila Jayapal, attempted to give themselves left cover by voting for a second bill that would include railroads workers' key demand for paid sick leave alongside the primary legislation to kill the strike. This sleight of hand should fool no one. However, it was widely recognized that the sick leave bill would face sudden deaths in the Senate, which it did the following day, and all that would be left would be a broken strike. Now, look, I want to read this segment right here with a retired railroad worker and union officer who wrote this. It's not just money, it's quality of life. The press has you think that a 25% raise over 5 years is a lot. It's not. Not when inflation is between 8 to 10% a year. It's not even breaking even. But the bigger issue is quality of life. Freight railroads operate 24/7, 655 days a year. Almost all train employees work on call, with only 2 hours or less notice before going to work, not including travel time. With massive cutbacks over the past period, everyone has to live by the phone. It's not unusual for employees at some railroads to work 3 or more weeks without any real time off from the job or other than the federally mandated rest periods between shifts, most of which was spent time sleeping. Disciplinary charges, meaning suspensions without pay, were given to a lot of employees. In some cases, they were even denied the ability to attend family funerals. Highlight that there, under threats of suspension or dismissal. This is why employees are fighting this time around. Enough is enough. This is the context of Biden's negotiation tentative agreement, wherein the sole improvement was a single paid personal day, which was itself undermined by absurd conditions, and that it could only be on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and would be scheduled 30 days in advance.
That's not a personal day.
Despite calls by some on the left for an illegal wildcat strike, the absolute failure of union leaders to mobilize or prepare for a strike action now makes this an extremely difficult option for their members. Despite the blazing anger of thousands of workers at this brutal attack on their rights, the union leaders preferred instead to rely on the old tried and failed strategy of begging the Democratic politicians to come to their defense. It is, of course, not ruled out that rail workers will take independent action in the face of yesterday's betrayal, in which case Social Alternative and my office will be there every step of the way to support them successfully carrying out wildcat action on the scale necessary would require that independent and democratic organization structures are immediately set up, strike leaders elected across the various locals, and a strike fund be established and built rapidly. Folks, I said this before in the show. They don't like you, they don't think about you, and they don't respect you. AOC, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Democratic establishment, the Republican establishment, previous Democratic presidents, previous Republican presidents. They don't like you. They don't respect you. They dance and drink because they believe you, and I'm talking to you, they think you are weak. See what I mean? We got to break away from the two-party system. They don't like us. That even includes Bernie Sanders. He doesn't like you either. I'm so sorry. Trump, he doesn't like you either. Sorry, Bernie Sanders supporters and Trump supporters. It's the truth. You got to rip that Band-Aid off. It's the only way we're going to get better.